generations to come.
And welcome to this week's edition of the Thoroughbred Daily News Writers Room. My name is Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the TDN. I co-host the Down the Stretch radio show with Dave Johnson on Sirius XM Radio.
I'm Randy Moss with NBC Sports and the Buyer Speed Figure team.
TD Thornton, also a correspondent at TDN.
Usually on the TDN Writers Room podcast, we have the guest of the week, the Gainesway guest of the week. In the second or third segment, we're going to do something a little bit different today. And we're going to bring in Dale Romans as this week's Gainesway guest of the week. Dale is the president of the Kentucky Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association, or Kentucky HBPA. He's not a member of the board of the Florida HBPA or Florida Horsemen's Group, but he really keeps his finger on top of things. He's at Gulfstream for the winter. So, Dale, I know that you care quite a bit about horsemen's issues. You've obviously been following this. We have so much to talk about with the news that Gulfstream Park may not last any more than 3 more years. The first thing I want to ask you, there's been a lot of kind of disagreement or miscommunication. At first, it came out that the Horsemen's Group was in favor of decoupling. Then later it came out that, no, that's not really the case. They were just going to take a neutral stand. What do you understand as we speak is the official position of the horsemen?
Well, I think that they came out in favor of decoupling. Why, I have no idea. But I will give the board some credit. I think they've listened to their constituents and for the horsemen here in South Florida and have changed their stance.
This news that Gulfstream might be imperiled, Dale, kind of comes up quickly to the general public. It was a surprise, I think, to the three of us here on the TDN Writers Room. The Stronach Group, First Racing, which is their other corporate name, they've been talking for years about how racing and gaming is number one revenue maker. They just invested a $10 million Tapeta track at Gulfstream. All things seem to be looking up. This seemed to be coming out of the blue. Did the horsemen have any inkling that Gulfstream was in trouble and might not last beyond 3 more years?
Well, I didn't. I had no inkling. I don't think the regular horsemen on the backside, I can't speak for the board of their horsemen's group here, but I don't think anybody that races here had any idea what was in the plans. What they say is the property has become too valuable for a racetrack to sit on it, basically. And that's why they want to decouple, because right now the way the state law is, they have to run 40 days in order to have the casino license. And if you decouple, they wouldn't have to run at all, and they could basically close it if they wanted to and develop the property and still have the casino.
So as part of the pitch to the horsemen that Keith Brackpool made a week ago last Wednesday, he said that Gulfstream would commit in writing, I believe he said, if the horsemen supported decoupling, to 3 years of funding of purses from alternate sources other than the casino at the same level that horsemen had been getting in the past. In your opinion, is there any movement among the horsemen to accept that proposal? What's your gut feeling?
My gut feeling is there isn't, Randy. Let me tell you what my personal feeling is about that. It would probably take them more than 3 years to get all the planning done to get the property developed. By the time you rezoned and you did all the things you have to do with permits and stuff in the South Florida. So I don't think they're really offered anything. And it's obviously not about the money going to purses, because they say they'll keep the purse account whole. But what that tells you, within 3 years, they could close down, have no incentive to race, develop the property, and still have the cornerstone of the development being a slot casino. So it's not about the money going into the purses. It's about developing the property and maintaining the slot casino on that development.
Dale, we've talked a lot about the property values of places like Gulfstream, and I think it was maybe Randy that made a good comment that nobody's going to sell the property at Prairie Meadows. It's just not worth very much money, and that type of track. But obviously they're right. I mean, I know people don't want to hear it, and that Keith Brackpool right now is kind of the boogeyman to people, but he's not wrong when he says this property is worth a whole lot of money. Do the horsemen have any leverage? Because if they fight this, what's stopping Belinda Stronach from pulling the plug literally the next day on racing and saying, you're not getting your 3 years, you're not getting 3 more hours out of me?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Yes, it's her property, and Belinda can do it and maximize her assets any way she wants to. But in my opinion, would you shut down what's a revenue producer tomorrow and is making you money, paying all the taxes on that property because that property is so valuable? What's the tax if it sits there empty for 3 years while they prepare to develop it? So I don't think that we're in jeopardy anytime in the near future. I mean, 3 years is near future, though. I mean, that's the full crop that's going to be born in Ocala this year. So, but as far as shutting down tomorrow, I don't think it would make business sense for her to do that because it is paying for their taxes. It's showing a profit. It's just not a big enough profit to stop from developing it over the future.
Dale, this has come on very quickly, as we said. So, and you mentioned that 3 years is the kind of near or medium term, but what should we expect to happen in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months?
Well, I think it's all up to Tallahassee. I mean, there's a bill that's in the House, and it's got to pass through the House and the Senate and be signed by Governor DeSantis. And I believe there's some pretty powerful groups working against it. I mean, we all know it's much easier to kill a bill than it is to get one passed. So it's all up to Tallahassee what they do.
So we know, or at least we think we know, that if the horsemen came out in support of decoupling, it would make the road to pass the bill a lot easier in Tallahassee. So when Keith Brackpool was meeting with the horsemen last week, essentially it was a negotiation by him, right? He was trying to get the horsemen on board to support what Gulfstream wanted to do. So he had a vested interest in gloom and doom and making things seem as desperate as possible to try to get the horsemen to join. Do you think there's any chance that maybe that was just sort of posturing and that they don't really feel like they want to completely cut the cord on racing at Gulfstream?
Well, I don't think they want to completely cut the cord within the next 3 years. Like I said, it's probably take that long to get the place ready to develop. And if you cut the cord, there goes all the revenue that you do have coming in. This track is a profitable racetrack. It's just not showing enough profit to probably sit on that piece of land. So I think, it was basically, to me, a threat. Either join us or in Tallahassee, or we will close before the 3 years. If you join us, then we'll guarantee 3. But what's going to happen, what incentive is there to run a race meet on this property in 3 years if the casino can go on without running?
Well, what should be happening right now, then, if the horsemen believe that the clock is ticking and after 3 years there's likely to be no more Gulfstream Park?
Well, I would like some of the powers a lot smarter than me to get involved and try to find a new place to race in South Florida. And if it happens down the road, that we have a place to go. I mean, the best scenario, in my opinion, which I don't know how feasible it is, would be to go back to Hialeah. I mean, I was at Hialeah a couple of years ago. I just went back over there to reminisce, and I couldn't believe what good shape the grandstand's in. The racetrack's still there. The turf course is still there. It looked like a little maintenance on the racetrack, put some barns up, and you could open the doors tomorrow. And there's not a more beautiful racetrack in America. And I've been told that it's a wild bird sanctuary. So that's a piece of land that can't really be developed. I mean, sure, there's a bunch of obstacles, but I think there's some powers to be in this game to start looking at it and trying to talk to the Burnettis and see if they have any interest in getting Hialeah back up and going.
Dale, I think everybody would love to see that happen. I mean, Hialeah becoming what it is today is a tragedy of what a beautiful place it is. I've taken sort of a different stance. My suggestion was they should move racing to Palm Meadows. But let's get back to the Hialeah situation. And we know they have no barns anymore. I'm sure those can be rebuilt. But what I don't quite understand about this is old man, Mr. Burnetti, has passed away, but his sons now run the racetrack. They don't need horse racing. They already have a casino, and one that's apparently quite profitable, more profitable than the one at Gulfstream Park. So what would be in it for them, and why would they say yes to this?
Well, they have to maintain the building still. The whole place is sitting there. I would think if they could rent the property, run a meet, not have to handle the maintenance anymore, would be pretty big incentive. Plus, I think the Burnettis are racing fans and like racing. I don't think they wanted to close down there. I think that when they got rid of the commission in Florida, it was wild, wild west. You run any dates you want. And Gulfstream wanted to run over top of their dates, and everybody was fighting for the premier dates. If you remember years ago, they used to alternate the early dates between Hialeah and Gulfstream, and then Calder would race every summer. When they got rid of the racing commission here and basically said you can run whatever you want, it was the survival of the fittest. Who was going to last longer, Gulfstream or Hialeah, running the premier dates against one another? Gulfstream won the battle. But if there wasn't competition and you could run at Hialeah, you could have your place maintained without any cost and probably get a nice rent check to do it. I think there is some incentive there. And you talk about Palmettos. I would say that land is in the same situation that Gulfstream Park is. I mean, that's a very valuable piece of land in a rich neighborhood that could be developed probably for a lot better than the training center sitting there. That's what worries me about Palmetto.
Dale, one thing just to clear up, even though that this is a statewide bill and widening the lens a little bit here, my understanding is that Tampa Bay Downs would not be affected because Tampa Bay Downs only has a card room license and not a casino license. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the way I understand it, too. It doesn't affect Tampa, which, it might be a boom for Tampa. Tampa's a great place, but, if they had a little bit better purses, it's a nice little racetrack. I mean, we could race there, but still, we're not developing players in South Florida anymore. We don't have the South Florida connection. Tampa's still a long ways from here.
Well, Dale, we've been talking different time frames, 3 years. Let's look into your crystal ball. Let's talk 10 years. Where is South Florida racing 10 years from now? Is it running? Is it not running? If it is running, where's it running at, et cetera? How do you see this playing out in the long run?
I wish I had a crystal ball, and I'll tell you, I wish it would still be running at Gulfstream Park. I love the place. I like what Frank's done down here. The Stronachs have been great for racing. I'd love to still see them in the game. My wish list would be that everything smooths out. We work together to develop some areas around Gulfstream and still running. It's too historic a racetrack to go away. In the last 15 years, we've lost Hollywood, Calder, Arlington Park. I mean, whoever ever thought those racetracks would be gone, I just can't see not racing at Gulfstream. And this, if this would be the first domino to fall, to go on to some bigger things.
It's interesting you said that about dominoes to fall because, and I'm not bringing up anything that anybody else hasn't thought about already, but once this is all settled and done and they come up with whatever they're going to come up with, if you're a Southern California horseman, wouldn't you be worried we're next?
They're teetering out there. That's a shame. I don't know what the answer is for California. I'm not up to speed on it, but I know it's not good. And, that would be a real shame. Let's say Gulfstream fell, California fell, Santa Anita fell. It's not only that we don't have places to race, but we're not developing people into the game in those areas anymore. And they're such highly populated areas, and the sport's still popular in them. And those two places fall, who knows what's to happen to the rest of the country. I mean, will we end up with just New York and Kentucky running?
Well, let's certainly hope not. Well, Dale, thanks for taking some time out, and good for you rolling up your sleeves and trying to help with this problem. And let's hope that we can come back and talk to you in between now and less than 3 years and paint a brighter future for Gulfstream Park.
But thanks for having me, and I hope we get it all worked out. Linda Stronach is a fan of racing, and she's been done a lot of good things. Hopefully things come together, and we all can keep racing at Gulfstream.
Thanks so much, Dale. Thanks for joining us.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Dale Romans, our guest of the week, was brought to you by Gainesway, home of the Grade 1 winning multimillionaire and track and stakes record setter, Olympiad. Olympiad had both speed and stamina. He won from 7 furlongs to 1.25 miles. The 1.25 miles, of course, being the Jockey Club Gold Cup at Saratoga. 8 Beyer speed figures of 100 or higher, multiple 111 Beyers when winning the Stephen Foster and also finishing second to Flightline in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Olympiad's first yearlings at the sales ring this summer, and he stands at Gainesway for a fee of $35,000. Gainesway, power, passion, performance.
Olympiad gets the gold in the Jockey Club Gold Cup.
250,000.
350,000. 325,000.
At Keeneland, a horse will always be measured in hands. Hands that see, that sense, that speak. Hands that hold our sport to a higher standard. Not for our sake, but for theirs. For the love of the horse, for generations to come.
The Keeneland January sale concluded its 3-day run Wednesday in Lexington with figures largely in line with its 4-day 2024 edition. Through 3 days, 685 head grossed $33,444,900 for an average of $48,825 and a median of $22,000. That average was up 6% and the median was up a whopping 47% from last year's 4-day sale.
Now for the fastest horse of the week. This week brought to you by Independence Hall, one of those fast sires at Windstar Farm. Independence Hall happens to be the only undefeated 2-year-old standing at stud by constitution. So he was precocious, and now he has his first 2-year-olds on the track this year. 4 of those 2-year-olds will be running for hot trainer Ken McPeak, who bought them as yearlings in 2024. Some of Independence Hall's yearlings, 3 of them, sold for $350,000, $310,000, $285,000. All of that for just a stud fee at Windstar of $7,500 for Independence Hall. Now, the fastest horse of the week this week ran in the Cal Cup Sprint on Saturday at Santa Anita. Big City Lights, who recorded a winning buyer speed figure of 104, finally out of the shadow of that famous California sprinter, the Chosen Vron. Big City Lights was the horse, if you recall, who was second to the Chosen Vron in 4 consecutive California bred stakes races in 2022 and 2023. Now, without the Chosen Vron in the California Cup Sprint, he was a 1-10 favorite and recorded his second big margin victory in a row, winning Saturday by 7 3/4 lengths. The fastest horse of the week, the Calbred, Big City Lights.
Well, guys, we just heard from Dale Romans, and as usual, he's had some very good thoughts on the situation at Gulfstream Park. I don't know if he added anything to make us a little bit more optimistic. At least I didn't. But he also made some good points about, I thought the fact that he didn't think they'd get this done in 3 years with all the red tape they'd have to go through and the licensing and the permits and whatnot. But nonetheless, I mean, any way you look at this, I mean, whether it's 3 days, 3 years, or 30 years, I don't see a situation where racing at Gulfstream Park is going to still be around, say, 10 years from now. Am I being, too much of a worrywart, Randy, or am I being practical?
Look, there's a lot we don't know. I mean, to use the sports analogy, this is just the opening kickoff, right? There are probably going to be a lot of twists and turns. Politicians could get involved. You never know who else might step into the mix. We could spend the whole podcast talking about the various factors involved, but I want to focus primarily on the number one thing that we know and the number one thing that we don't know, right? And just start there. And obviously, the number one thing we know is that the property at Gulfstream Park is mega valuable. We've talked about that. Estimates can be as much as $2 billion for the whole 250 acres. And really, the only scenario for racing there in the long term, longer than 3 years, is if the owner of the property is passionate enough about thoroughbred racing to prioritize racing at Gulfstream for the foreseeable future over cashing in on the much bigger profit in the short term. Now, if you imagine a graph, okay, and on the far right side of the graph is pure capitalism, right? Maximizing profit. On the far left side of the graph is passion for thoroughbred racing. The number one thing we don't know is where in 2025, Belinda Stronach fits on that graph, right? Is she now totally going to maximize profit? Is she going to try to keep Gulfstream Park as a part of that mix one way or the other? Has she now decided that it's not worthwhile to continue all the investments that she's been making in thoroughbred racing? We don't know. That's the main thing we don't know. Ironically, when you're talking about an owner who would be passionate enough about thoroughbred racing to ignore the short-term profit and keep the track running as is, they had one of those. It was her father, Belinda Stronach's father, Frank Stronach, now 92 years old. And ironically, he endured a tremendous amount of criticism from within the industry while he was the owner of Gulfstream Park and Santa Anita. He lost control of the tracks, obviously, in a power struggle with Belinda Stronach. Right now, he's not involved with racing at First Racing, formerly the Stronach Group, anymore. But 6 years ago, here's what Frank Stronach was quoted as saying. Okay, quote, "The big rift, family rift, started because my daughter wanted to sell the racetracks. And I said, I don't want to sell. I want to make sure the racetracks don't go down." Frank said he thought there was enough money to take care of his children and grandchildren many times over. He wanted to put Gulfstream, Santa Anita, and his other tracks into a trust and have the trustees consist of people in the thoroughbred racing industry who would administer everything that had to do with the two tracks. Again, he said, quote, "Could we develop some hotels and condominiums and stores? Of course, but not to the detriment of the racetracks. I hope I can convince Belinda of this." So now we're 6 years down the road. Belinda Stronach is still not sold to Gulfstream. She's not sold Santa Anita. She's put a lot of money into both tracks, the Pegasus, the California Crown. She withstood the outcry after the horse deaths at Santa Anita, which had to be a difficult thing to do. She said a lot of good things about horse racing. Where does she stand right now? The sport's not particularly healthy. The foal crop is plummeting. Has she decided now's the time to back away? We'll find out. We don't know.
Yeah. And it's, again, the timing of this and the way that this news broke, it's, I would liken it to an analogy of, for the past few months, everybody's been worried about Santa Anita. Is Santa Anita going to slide off the grid over on the West Coast? And then, of course, the fires earlier this month. And is racing imperiled at Santa Anita? What's going to happen to California as a whole? And it's almost the analogy that I would make is, it's like hearing that somebody in the family is sick and it's Santa Anita, but then you hear Uncle Gulfstream Park is sick, and that's kind of coming out of the blue. You didn't think that would be news that would be developing here. So, of the thing, Randy hits on a good point. What do we know? There's a lot of unknowns, and what do we know? What we do know is that Belinda Stronach has led with the request or almost the demand for decoupling. That was first and foremost. So if this is a poker game, that's the first card that they've played. That's what they've shown us. So if they wanted to just sell the real estate, or if she just wanted to sell the real estate and get out, she could do that any day. She wouldn't need the horsemen's cooperation or their consent or the state's consent to do that. I thought Dale brought up a good point about somebody's got to pay the bills for the taxes and whatever, and that's the revenues from racing. However, I read an interesting piece by Ron Flatter over at Horse Racing Nation, and he made this analogy. So he said, if Gulfstream really just wanted to just sell the property instead of getting the decoupling, I guess what I'm trying to say is, he said the decoupling is what they led with first. If that's what they really want, if they end up just selling the property without getting what they ostensibly really want, the decoupling, his analogy was that's like rubbing out the hostage before getting your ransom money.
One of the interesting things about the casino there, and I have a couple thoughts of, I'm not so sure how successful this casino would be. I mean, there are casinos in Florida like Starbucks. I mean, in every other street corner. The Hard Rock Hotel is one of the most famous casinos. You see the ads all the time. I mean, even in Minnesota, they probably play these ads, right, for the Hard Rock. It's just up the street from there. And their own, remember, they already have a casino license, and it's when they say, I think they said that the $6 million a year goes from that casino into purses. That's peanuts, absolute peanuts when you consider how much that this money, how much purse money comes out of casinos from places like Philadelphia Park, and of course now what is the things that are going on in Kentucky and Arkansas, where it's just getting these phenomenal purses. But let's try to move ahead, and this is kind of trying to whack-a-mole a little bit too. But everybody's go ahead, Randy.
Well, I want to make one more point about this. Okay. To me, here's the hope. Okay. Here's the glimmer of hope that might be out there. Belinda, at any time over the past 6 years, after Frank said she wanted to sell, could have sold all the property, done away with to developers, done away with Gulfstream Park, collected her $1 to $2 billion and been out of this. But she didn't. And she has been talking for years now about the possibility of building a hotel adjacent to Gulfstream Park. This just didn't come out of the blue. And we know that the casino is underperforming. The Hialeah Casino does twice as much business as the Gulfstream Park Casino. So when they said to the Horsemen that they wanted to decouple because investors that they wanted to bring in to the new hotel casino didn't want to be involved with horse racing, but that they would guarantee the money from other parts. Okay. I mean, she's been talking about a hotel for a long time. So the glimmer of hope would be that that's why they want decoupling. That's actually, they were actually telling the truth, is to get investors in to build this hotel casino, keep the racetrack going, maybe get better business in the casino, and at least for the immediate future, have Gulfstream Park as well as the property, because the property is not going to depreciate. That property is, real estate typically does not depreciate, especially very valuable real estate. So there'd be no absolute pressing need to sell it right away. That, to me, that's the hope.
Here's one of the many things. And you're right, Randy, when you said there's so many unanswered questions here, but why can't she have her cake and eat it too? The hotel casino would take up a very small, relatively small amount of land. I think they say they're going to build it by near the Pegasus statue, which is kind of off to the side. Is there any scenario where she keeps racing, they give her the casino, and then she sells off, part of the land or something like that? Why wouldn't that make sense? It doesn't make sense to me that it's all or nothing. If you don't give me this casino, I'm going to close down. If you get the casino, what are you going to do with the other 7/8 of the property that are going to sit empty? This hotel casino is not, from a size standpoint, is, and I don't know the first thing about, acreage and everything down there, but it's going to leave plenty of room still for a racetrack.
And as you and TD know, that's already been done on that site. The original old Gulfstream Park had this big, expansive, fabulous back lawn with a back paddock that was really the signature of old Gulfstream Park. Now it's gone because Frank Stronach shrunk the grandstand so that he could create Gulfstream Park Village. All of those shops that you see now behind Gulfstream Park, where that big back lawn used to be located. So they've already kind of done that before, but maybe they can do more of it.
All right. Is there any solutions beyond the future of racing at Gulfstream? Some people are talking about maybe moving it to Hialeah. I've been writing about moving it to Prairie Meadows. Again, this isn't going to happen overnight.
Meadows.
I said Prairie. What I say Prairie Meadows.
That would be a long commute.
I could just see Todd Pletcher with the string at Prairie Meadows in March in Iowa. Okay, but does the idea of moving racing to Hialeah, to Palm Meadows, or some people have said Ocala, some people have said even Adena Springs has a pretty nice, that's Stronach's farm. Is that an avenue people should be pursuing? I think very much it is. Again, every time you bring this up, you bring up more questions than answers. But I went back and read a story written 20 years ago by Mike Welsh in the Daily Racing Form, where they were talking all about what Frank's plan was to close down Gulfstream because of the value of the property, and then to run racing at Palm Palm Meadows. The reason he couldn't do it is because he didn't understand the laws down there that you're only allowed one parimutuel license per county. And the dog track, the Palm Beach Kennel Club, owned by the Rooney family, had that license. He would not have been allowed to. And maybe even though they don't race dogs there, they still may have the only license because I understand, they still have a card room and simulcasting. So, but I see that as one possibility. How about you guys?
The location is one part of the debate or the big question, but the other part is who owns, runs, and handles the day-to-day operations. I mean, let's look at a wider time frame and at a wider cross-section of the country and just some different ideas over the past 5 years. I live up near Boston in Massachusetts, where Suffolk Downs closed for good in 2019. By state law here, there's something called the Racehorse Development Fund, where the casinos have to put in a portion of their initial upfront licensing fees and contribute their revenues. Right now, there's $20 million sitting in that fund. It can go to purses. And there have been, I've almost lost count, there have been at least 10 proposed racetracks in Massachusetts over the past 6 years, a number of them ideas floated by the local horsemen's group. Not one of them has gained traction. They've all been shot down by local resistance, some of them even before formal proposals have been made. So that's one example where who's going to run it, and the money is there and the locations are there, and nobody can come up with an answer. Another one is out in Chicago. Arlington closed in 2021. 2 years prior to that, the other racetracks in the state, Fairmount and Hawthorne, and Arlington too, before it closed, were given the opportunity to have racino licenses. That was a big dangle, a big carrot to dangle in front of those entities. And we're 6 years down the road, and Hawthorne can't get its act together. They can't get the financing together. They have a half-finished project sitting there on their property. So that's not working. In Northern California, we've just seen with the closure of Golden Gate Fields, another track shut down by the Stronach Group. The Horsemen tried to run a meet at Pleasanton. It failed, and they're not running a second meet. They were originally going to continue that and run from January into the spring. They're not doing it. It just failed abjectly. And now Santa Anita is the only game in town in California at this time of the year. In Maryland, where another Stronach track is on the way out, they're trying to do a partnership between the state and horsemen, and that's just getting off the ground. We don't know if that will work. So what are the answers to get these things to work? It's not just coming up with a piece of property where you can build an oval and run the races.
To me, the two logical solutions going forward, the obvious solutions, are Palm Meadows and Hialeah. Okay. Palm Meadows has a 1 mile racetrack, dirt racetrack. They have a turf course inside of it. They have plenty of room for a nice grandstand, actually a pretty big grandstand. They've got 1,200 stalls right there.
1,700, Randy.
1,700
stalls there,
but
yes.
What they don't have is huge in the equation: a casino. They do not have a casino. And nowadays, I don't think you're going to be sinking money into a new racing facility in 2025, 2028 if you don't have a casino. And chances are they have no hope of getting a casino, because when Palm Meadows first came into existence, it opened in November of 2002. Really, the only reason why the Palm Beach County Commissioners gave permission over local objections for the training center at Palm Beach Downs is because it sits on what's called an agricultural reserve. And they thought that horses, rural, etc., sort of fit into the pattern of having an agricultural reserve. And even so, they had a lot of local complaints about putting just a training center in there. Even if they could get state permission, local permission, to put a casino there, can you imagine the outcry, the public outcry of those people? Putting a casino now as well as a racetrack in the spot where they didn't even want a training center. So to me, Hialeah, the more I think about it, is the most logical option. The casino is already doing great guns, so the people down there want to bet. You have a metropolitan area right there. You have a gorgeous racetrack. From what I understand, the barn area, which was almost destroyed by a hurricane, has been redeveloped. So I don't know if you could really build barns to any great extent. Maybe a receiving barn or two, and you could just do the European model and have horses stabled at Palm Meadows, hopefully, if they could work that out, and have them vanned in to Hialeah on a daily basis. To me, I don't know. I tried to reach out to John Brunetti Jr. today, actually, as we tape this, but I haven't heard back from him yet to ask if there is any desire on his part for Hialeah to step into the void, assuming Gulfstream Park goes away. But I mean, that to me, given the casino limitations that might be evident at Palm Beach Downs or at Palm Meadows, would be the logical solution.
Randy, I agree with you to a point, but let's go back to, is there another Frank Stronach-like person out there that maybe would say this is not the very best business investment I've ever made, but I'm going to do this for the good of horse racing. And I don't want to put the weight of the world on the man's shoulders, but the first guy that comes to mind is Mike Rapoli.
And you mean buy Gulfstream Park, buy the land?
No, buy Palm Meadows.
But you don't have a casino.
I don't think they know. I'm not on the same page with you. I think it can work without a casino.
Okay, I don't.
Okay.
But so we'll have to disagree there. I don't think any major, I mean, look at Santa Anita. I don't think any major racetrack right now can be successful in attracting top-level horses without gaming revenue.
Right.
Unfortunately, I wish I didn't have to say that, but I think that's where we're at right now in thoroughbred racing. What do you think,
Okay.
TD?
Yeah, I can't recall the last time a track was built that wasn't tied into some sort of gaming revenues. Certainly not in this century, right?
No, and you probably never see it again. I mean, for instance, they've legalized racing in Georgia. Nobody's knocking on the door to open up a racetrack in Atlanta, one of the biggest markets in the country, because nobody has legalized casinos or slots or whatever in Georgia. All right, so we've covered pretty much everything there. Hopefully, there will be some good news coming out of this sooner rather than later. And but just the pit in my stomach, and I'm sure the pit in the stomach of so many people in horse racing about what this would all mean if Gulfstream would close down and South Florida can't find a solution to continue to have horse racing. It would be not just bad for South Florida racing. It would be terrible for the entire sport, no doubt about it.
Last Saturday at the fairgrounds, the first 20-point prep for the 2025 Kentucky Derby. It's the LeCompte Stakes, and the favorites ran 1-2. The 9-5 favorite, Disco Time from the Brad Cox barn, ran down the 5-2 second choice, Built, the gun runner winner, to win the LeCompte narrowly. The final time was slow, but the points still just the same. And now the top three currently in the point standings for the Derby. Of course, it's very early. Citizen Bull with 40 points, the winner of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Coal Battle, the Smarty Jones winner, 20. Disco Fever, also 20. All three bred in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We'll be right back after this.
With some of the fullest fields in the country and quality racing year-round, there's never been a better time to reap the rewards of breeding and racing in Kentucky. Purse money in Kentucky is at an all-time high, as is average purse per race, outpacing California, Florida, and New York. Kentucky breds. Breed them, raise them, race them. We all win.
Last weekend at Santa Anita, Cavalieri ran her record to a perfect 3-for-3 by winning the Grade 3 La Cañada Stakes. On this week's First Things First from Santa Anita, Michelle Hughes spoke to the trainer of Cavalieri, Mr. Bob Baffert.
Frank, I'm joined right now by trainer Bob Baffert, whose Cavalieri goes a perfect 3-for-3 here, Bob. And I feel like we all anticipated her being able to stretch out that extra 16th of a mile with no doubt. But what were your thoughts going into the race?
I mean, coming into it, the way she's been training and she's maturing, she's a big, beautiful, stout mare. And we knew we're going to hopefully, keep them healthy. We should have a lot of fun with her this year. And it was a big step up for her, run against some really nice fillies, and she handled it well, took a lot of pressure and kept going. I think she's going to improve off of this, big strong mare that she is. So very happy about it.
We were looking for an heir apparent for Adair Manor for the last couple of years for you. Maybe this filly can fill in her hoof steps.
Yeah, I mean, Adair Manor, she was something else. But it's nice to have these big mares and the clientele, Peter Floor and the Speedway Racing. They've been great, sending me these good horses. So I'm very happy about it.
And Zoe, of course.
And Zoe, she helps pick them out. But we got a great team,
All right, congratulations here with this win.
This weekend at Santa Anita, the California Wine Festival. It takes place from 12 to 4 p.m. on the Santa Anita Grandstand apron. Wine starter packs with 8 2-ounce tastings start at $37. Included in that $37 with your wine, a $5 betting voucher, admission, parking, and a tip sheet.
Well, last Saturday at 9:30 in the morning, what an odd time to put out a press release. But at that point, Heisa put out a press release saying, welcome back, Paco Lopez. He, of course, is the jockey who was caught on camera hitting a horse after the race was over in a really violent manner. This happened at Parks, striking it across the neck, maybe hitting it in the head as well. He lawyered up. He did all the smart things, said how much he was sorry. I'm going to go get therapy. I'm going to be a changed man. And lo and behold, they're bringing him back. He's coming back. What better time to bring him back than Pegasus Day? His suspension amounts to 50 days. That's a slap on the wrist to me. I'm not saying, kick him out of the sport for a year, but I thought he deserved at least 6 months, TD.
Yeah, and I think he's going for the soft return. He's not going to be at Pegasus Day. He's riding at Laurel that afternoon.
He is. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But it's the question of what do people expect in this day and age? I mean, that's basically the game plan for any professional athlete who runs afoul of the law or afoul of the rules. They say they're sorry. They go get some counseling. They make some donations, and the regulator at some point almost has to let them back in. I mean, Paco he can be a controversial figure for his aggression out there on the racetrack and some of his accusations of rough riding, some of the fist fights that he's gotten into. But yet, what is the alternative? People saying ban him for life, ban him for a year or two. We do live in a country where the judicial system doesn't look too kindly on taking away people's livelihoods if they're licensed by somebody. So it would have eventually ended up him going to court to plead his case. And we certainly have enough litigation going on in the sport. So I really don't, as to what he deserved and what did people expect, I think you have to balance it against what happens in these types of situations in this day and age.
Bill's making me look like a bleeding heart here. See you guys later. Oh, no. Look, actually, my opinion on this is this. Every day we see riders, not every day, but often enough, we see riders get disqualified for an incident in which they sometimes do, but usually narrowly avoid causing a spill that could have resulted in the loss of a horse's life or severe injury for a rider. Paco was suspended for 30 days at one point. I think it was 6 years ago for causing a spill that injured a couple of jockeys. This was a situation in which, what he did is inexcusable. Especially in today's day and age. But if you're a jockey and you cut off another jockey and you almost cause a disastrous spill, you get a 5-day suspension. You might get a 2-week suspension if it was really grievous. Or if Paco actually did cause a spill, he gets 30 days. This situation, he was given it's going to be, as you said, a 50-day suspension, right? So, look, he's a hothead. We know he's a hothead. The horse almost hurt him. Not that that's a valid excuse for hitting the horse, but that's why he was so upset. Yeah, he said the right things. I'll be a bleeding heart and say, give him a chance. But if it happens again, give him a year, give him 2 years.
All right. I'm going to hold you to that, Randy, because now I appreciate you, being able to give out these strong opinions and to talk about these things, because I got to think you're very upset. This was a bad week for you, my friend. Senor Buscador's been retired. Your
Spanish
horse.
Mr. Prospector. Yeah, they're doing the right thing by him. The Joey Peacock, the owner, trainer Todd Fincher. They had already said that they probably weren't going to send him back to Saudi Arabia for another shot at the $20 million because last year when they took him, he didn't bounce back very quickly from that. His form really never recovered from that trip overseas that made him a whole lot of money. So they were going to run him in the Pegasus one more time. And if he happened just to come out of the Pegasus fantastically, then they might think about shipping him over there. But apparently a workout that he had, his final prep for the Pegasus, they weren't pleased with it. And so they're doing the right thing by old Senor.
You're going to need to come up with some new favorite horses. Two Phils isn't around anymore either. What are you going to do?
I know. Adair Manor. Yeah.
There's a couple more in the pipeline from that dam, Rose's Desert. There's a 2-year-old colt. He's just been named The Hell We Did. He's signed by Authentic. And there's also a 3-year-old filly out of a half sister to Senor Buscador. She's already raced once. Her name was Rose. She was in the back of the pack in October in her lone start at Santa Anita, and she's now in training at Sunland Park with trainer Todd Fincher.
And The Hell We Did got by the Jockey Club. I love that.
So TD, you're TDN top 12 for, are you doing it? Is it 10 or 12 at this point?
It's a dozen. Yes.
It's a dozen. Okay. Well, you're going to have a busy weekend following the 3-year-old races at Oakland Park and the Southwest Stakes. Tell us what's going on there and how, particularly how it applies to your ratings for the top 3-year-olds.
Yeah, we've got 1/6 of the top 12 in there. We've got the horse who I've got ranked at number 2, Sandman, nice gray horse from trainer Mark Cassie's barn. He started 5 times. I've got him ranked pretty high. I was not on the podcast a couple of weeks ago when, Bill, you said you weren't aware of who this horse was. And I know. And I heard the entertaining that ensued from that. But yeah, I do try and like to make some outward reaches there from far outside the radar. And Sandman impressed me. He was the runner-up in the Street Sense Stakes back in the fall at Churchill Downs. And then he followed that up with a race at Oakland Park, mile race. It was an allowance race. Sat off the pace on the far turn. He looked like he might be blocked if he went on the inside and came up the rail. If he went to the outside, he was going to give up too much ground on one of those short stretch configurations where they ended the 16th pole. But he did dive through, kicked on late. I like it. I was surprised to see he's 5-1 in the morning line for this Saturday's Southwest, but that's because of the presence of a Bob Baffert shipper, Gaming, who I believe was favored in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile or one of the favorites. And then he came back and he was a disappointing 3rd at odds on in the Low Sal Futurity. And also Patch Adams, who I also have on the top 12. He's a TDN rising star, an electrifying double-digit win going 7 furlongs at Churchill back in November. And this will be his first time around 2 turns.
When
Randy,
Patch Adams won that maiden race at Churchill, Bill, he looked like a beast. Boy, did he look good. He's by Into Mischief from the same female family as Dubai World Cup winner, Well Armed. And here's the interesting thing to me, okay? Gaming is the 2-1 favorite. We know Bob Baffert's success at Oakland Park. He's got like a 50-something% record when he ships horses into Oakland for stakes races. Flavian Pratt rode this horse in the Del Mar Futurity and won. When they got to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, Flavian took off of Gaming to ride Chancer McPatrick in the Breeders' Cup. Gaming ran 2nd. Flavian got back on Gaming in the Low Sal Futurity and finishes 3rd. Who's Flavian riding in the Southwest? Patch Adams. You know, he could have ridden Gaming, the 2-1 favorite. Instead, he's riding the 5-2 second choice. And Flavian Pratt was not on him in that maiden win at Churchill Downs. It was Florent Giroux. Flojo rode him that day, but Flavian has picked up the mount, and he got a 98 buyer speed figure for that Churchill win. And I thought he looked even more impressive than a 98 buyer. So to me, I think he is definitely the horse to beat. And I like TD's exacta there of Patch Adams and Sandman, although he might prefer it the other way.
The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by XBTV, and this week's XBTV Work of the Week is, of course, another prep for the Pegasus World Cup Saturday at Gulfstream. This one's a little tough to see in the dark at Santa Anita, but that's Imagination on the outside and Citizen Bull on the inside, working 6 furlongs in 112 and 112.40. Saturday at Santa Anita for trainer Bob Baffert. We'll be right back after this message from XBTV.
Be a smarter, better with XBTV. The best horses. With thousands of exclusive morning workouts. All at your fingertips and delivered right into your inbox. Everything you need to be informed. Be smart. Bet smart with XBTV.
PA Bred, I think we've built a brand at this point.
It's excitement at every step.
Roses for Deborah just set a new track record.
On average, for the past decade, Pennsylvania paid over $28 million a year in Breeders' Awards, restricted races, and owner bonuses. Plus, PA Bred shine on the world's biggest stage. Just 3 states have bred more Breeders' Cup winners. Learn more at pabred.com.
TDN Writers Room also brought to you by our friends at the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association, the PHBA. Pennsylvania bred Simply Joking scored her second straight stakes win on Saturday at the fairgrounds in the Fasig-Tipton Silver Bullet Day Stakes, earning 20 points on the road to the Kentucky Oaks. Next start penciled in is the Rachel Alexandra at the fairgrounds. And we told you earlier about Disco Time's win and the Lecomte on the same card. Now, Disco Time is not a Pennsylvania bred, but his dam was. And as a matter of fact, the dams of Simply Joking and Disco Time, both Pennsylvania bred champions. The dam of Simply Joking, Imply, won 7 PA bred stakes and $775,000. The dam of Disco Time, Disco Chick, won 4 stakes and $735,000. Two of the Pennsylvania breds won at Open Company on Sunday. Winning on weekends, won at Aqueduct. Carrington won at Gulfstream. Carrington, perhaps the best named horse on that card at Gulfstream Park. Carrington was one of the important battles in the Battle of Normandy, made popular by the Band of Brothers TV show. And Carrington is the son of Omaha Beach. To learn more about the PA Bred program, go to pabred.com or call 610-444-1050.
Well, lots of racing. We talked about some of the big races at Oakland Park this weekend. Great weekend of racing, of course, that's highlighted by the Pegasus World Cup card. Randy Moss will be down at beautiful Gulfstream Park to bring the broadcast to eyes and ears of people all over America. We'll look forward to seeing Randy and his group there.
4:30 Eastern Time, NBC and Peacock. There you go.
There you go. So this is a card, one of those great cards with tons of stakes races. I thought it'd be easier to just go over the 3 Pegasus races, which starts with race 10, which is the Pegasus World Cup Filly and Mare Turf Invitational. My pick in there is the Pletcher horse Rakia from the one post. The post positions are very important in this race. I love the fact that she drew the one. She might be able to go to the lead. If she doesn't, she's going to be up close early. Frankie Dettori will be able to save ground. And she looked good in the Goldacova, winning her first start since coming over from Great Britain, and is now in the Todd Pletcher barn for Shadwell Stable. So I have a vote for Rakiwa in the Pegasus World Cup Filly Mare Turf.
Well, Rakia may be able to get around the racetrack carrying her assigned poundage. She might not be able to get around and win carrying both you and me on her back, though, because that's who I had selected. I did like her in that. I did like her coming out of that race. She had wired the field from the 9-hole on one of those stakes races on the Breeders' Cup undercard. Looking elsewhere, maybe Manushka from trainer Brendan Walsh's barn. She had some trip trouble in her U.S. debut. She had shipped over from France at Keeneland in an allowance race, and she won as the favorite on that afternoon. Then she had a better than it looks 4th place try in her second U.S. start. She was 4th, but only beaten about a length and a half, and a willing wide drive in the Mrs. Revere at Churchill. So I would toss her in there as well.
Boy, you think Rakia's carrying a lot of weight with two of you. How about three of us?
Whoa.
No, look, I think Sacred Wish is a better horse than Rakia. Okay. Last time Rakia had the benefit of a very, very easy, uncontested pace. Frankie Dettori just seized control from an outside post position and slowed the pace down, finished very strongly. If you go two races back in the Goldacova at Del Mar, that same race that Rakia won, Sacred Wish was third 2 races ago for Sacred Wish. If you go back and watch that, she had trouble. She lacked a lot of room around the second turn. I came away from that race thinking Sacred Wish was the best horse. But now she's got post 10 out of 12. And Bill, you pointed out, 1.16 on the turf at Gulfstream, a very short run to the first turn. And Rakia draws the rail, even though I don't think she may not make the early lead in here again. She doesn't have to be in the lead, as she showed in some of her races in Europe. That was her very first race in the United States. She was transferred from trainer Owen Burrows to Todd Pletcher. This is the first time Pletcher will saddle her. But because of post position, I'm going to take Rakia and Dettori over Sacred Wish.
Race 12 is the Pegasus World Cup Turf Invitational. The obvious favorite will be Nation's Pride for Charlie Appleby and William Buick. Horses coming off a dismal performance in Bahrain last time out, but imagine there must have been something going on where you could draw a line through it. I'm going to try to beat Nation's Pride, though. As good as Appleby is and as good as this horse is, he's already proven what he is in the U.S. He's run here so many times. He did win the Arlington Million, but he's just an okay. Well, he's better than okay. He's a good grade 1 horse, but he's not one of those Charlie Appleby like jet planes that are just going to whistle around the racetrack and nobody will have a chance. I'm going to give our friends West Point Thoroughbreds Integration. That's going to be my pick in here. Now, they did run against each other against Nation's Pride. The Arlington Million, Nation's Pride won that day. But distance-wise, I think Integration is a much better fit at 1 1/8, where he is 3 for 5. That's the distance of Saturday's race at Gulfstream. The Nation's Pride is at 1 1/8. He's been usually running in much longer races, has run at 1 1/8 only once in his career and finished third in that. So, and of course, I think you'll get, even though it's Shug and Frankie Dettori, I think they're going to be betting Charlie Appleby and William T. Buick. So I'm hoping for a little bit of a mild upset from the West Point gang.
If slight interest in the other Shug horse, Battle of Normandy. We don't usually think of Shug as a turf trainer, but he's certainly very adept on the grass. But this one is really blossoming and won 4 straight races between 1 1/16 and all the way up to 1 3/8. Has won at the allowance level, only won a grade 3 stakes, so that's maybe going to be counted against him in the betting, but it will give you some points as far as if you want to back him in this race. He's going to be pretty decent value, and he runs those consistent mid-90s buyer numbers. Nobody's really jumping off the page at me buyer-wise here, Randy. What number would it take to win the race?
I think it'll take about a 102, 103 to win it, in my opinion. Nation's Pride's the only horse that's run that fast. When you look at the Arlington Million, where he ran against Integration, going around the second turn, they were right together. Integration was on the inside of Nation's Pride. Integration was being ridden a little bit at that point by Kendrick Carmouche to try to keep up with Nation's Pride. And as soon as William Buick relaxed his hold on Nation's Pride, boom, he left Integration behind by like 2.5 lengths. And they were trying to get Integration to keep up with him. He just didn't have that turn of foot. Now, he kept plugging away. Integration never gave up and kept trying all the way down to the wire, but really couldn't close the gap in any meaningful way. I think the best hope Integration has to turn the tables is that Nation's Pride would be off form after that disastrous run last time in Bahrain. But he's already shown he doesn't like Bahrain. He ran once before in the same race and didn't run very well. So I'm more inclined to be able to throw that race out because of that. A horse I'm kind of interested in, depending on the price, is the West Coast shipper Mi Hermano Ramon. He was narrowly beaten by Johannes in his last start, and we know how good Johannes is. And Johannes just nipped him at the wire. So numbers-wise, I think Mi Hermano Ramon fits pretty well in there. And if he goes off at 6-7 to 1, if they kind of overlook him at Gulfstream Park, I think he'd be worth a worth a second look.
The big one, race 13, the Pegasus World Cup Invitational, worth $3 million. Grade 1, of course, and there is a field of 12 in here. After Locht won the Cigar Mile, I said right then, well, he'll be my pick in the Pegasus because, this is a horse that showed a lot of promise early on in his career. Kind of went in the wrong direction. Now looks like Todd Pletcher really has him back to where he was back as a 2-year-old and was a horse that we were considering for the major races. He went off at 2-1 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but I will not pick anybody from post 11 in this race. I often think they should make this race a mile and 3/16 to make it just a little bit more fair. You got to be really the best horse to be able to win from that post out there, and I can't do it. So I'm not going to take him. So I'm going to move to the inside with Saudi Crown, Brad Cox and Florent Giroux. It's another horse that's kind of been in and out. My goodness, he lost by 58 lengths in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Wondering what the heck went on that day. Well, whatever it was, Brad Cox figured it out, and he brought him back in a small stake, the Tenacious Stakes at the Fairgrounds, to win there by 2 lengths. Now, to me, this is a prep for a prep for a prep for him because he just won a prep for the Pegasus World Cup. Pegasus World Cup is a prep for the Saudi Cup. He's owned by Saudi interests, and I would be almost positive that they're looking to take him to Saudi Arabia after this race. So Saudi Crown for me.
I'm going to lead off my analysis here by saying that by talking about 2 horses who aren't in the race. And as an East Coast guy, I'm constantly having to check my own mind to see, do I have a bias against West Coast horses? And I have to say, in this case, I was waiting over the past couple of months until they were sidelined with some injuries. I was waiting for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile winner, Full Serrano, to stretch out into this race. He's not participating. And also Subsanador, who I was really intrigued with last year from Richard Mandelo's barn. He was aiming for this race initially, but he never even made it into the Breeders' Cup. I agree with you on Locht. I'm a little anti-Locht here. I thought he was an outside stalker, got second run into kind of a little bit of a softened up pace in the Cigar Mile. But the horse that you would think would be the headline horse we haven't talked about yet. What's up with Mystic Dan in here? The Derby winner hasn't won a race since the Derby. He was 6th and last in the Malibu on opening day at Santa Anita. That was a difficult ship for him. That's not his best distance. Trainer Kenny McPeak didn't have an obvious excuse, or he didn't present one. He just said, we're going to throw that one out and try again here. But kind of surprised that the Derby winner isn't the horse that bubbles out of our mouths right away first off here.
Good point. Look, I can't like Mystic Dan off his race in the Malibu. I just can't. He just didn't show anything. So to me, that's a no-go. I can't go for Locht from the number 11 post position. Also, in the 8 runnings of the Pegasus World Cup, the farthest that any winner has been behind at any point in the race is 2 lengths. And only 3 horses were as far as 2 lengths behind, only 3 of the 8 winners. And Locht will almost certainly be farther behind than 2 lengths because from that outside post position, you'd have to think they're going to have to go back and over instead of trying to go forward and over unless they get lucky and something materializes in the middle of the pack. I didn't like White Abarrio's last race. I loved his first race, the allowance comeback in the 7 furlong race. And then for whatever reason, in his last start in a 6 race, he goes out the back. And not only is he much further behind than he had been before in a similarly paced race, he didn't finish as quickly as he did in the other race. You would think if you're that far back conserving all that energy, at least you're going to come flying like a bat out of hell. No, he finished slower than he did the time before. And so I just have questions about where White Abarrio is right now going into this race. So to me, I think by default, I think it's got to be Saudi Crown. I think he'll make the early lead. To me, the Dirt Mile, it was a horrible race, but there was so much speed in there. They sent him away from the gate. They went super fast fractions. He couldn't keep up with that kind of a pace. He's a speed horse, so he just went out the back. Also, he'd been dealing with a foot problem going into that race. It compromised his training just a little bit. I liked his last race at the fairgrounds. It was against much easier horses. He set off the pace a little bit for the first time, which showed a new dimension. I don't think he's going to need to do that here. I think he'll probably make the lead from post position number 2. He fits the pattern of the racetrack as far as speed goes. I like him.
And if it rains, he moves up big.
Yeah. And I think he'll be the favorite, though. The TDN Riders are brought to you by West Point Thoroughbreds, which teams with Hall of Fame trainer Shug McGahee for 2 starters in the Pegasus World Cup Turf. At Gulfstream, we've already talked about integration. They also have Battle of Normandy integration coming off that win in the Red Smith at Aqueduct, 3-1 second choice. Battle of Normandy on a 4-race win streak. Most recently, the River City Stakes at Churchill Downs. And also on Saturday, as we told you, if you were watching at the top of the podcast or a little bit earlier, Sandman will be running at Oaklawn Park in the Southwest Stakes for 3-year-old Sandman. Also brought to you by West Point Thoroughbreds.
All the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
I want to thank everybody for turning in and watching us on this week's edition of the TDN Writers Room podcast. Especially want to thank my partners, Randy Moss, and this week, TD Thornton, filling in for Zoe Cabin, who is busy working today at Santa Anita, because it was a Monday when we recorded this. And of course, they were running because of Martin Luther King's birthday. I also want to thank our producers, Katie Petroniak, Eclipse Award winner, Sue Finley, Anthony LaRocca, and Aaliyah LaRocca. We'll see you next week.